right, go.
Wait, should we do you want to do a little introduction of her?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I
You
think it
want
would
to
be
do it
good.
after?
Let me share her spotlight. Okay, there we go. All right. The next one that we are presenting, the next author is Dr. Alyse Price-Tobler. Her chapter is titled "The Psychology of Family Bonds: Clinical Diagnosis, Misinterpretation, and Survivor Trauma from High Conflict Family Court." She's just an amazing human being, and she's out of Australia. And so she's created a video to share with us, um, because right now it's the middle of her sleeping. So we figured, but she did want to
She's not awake yet.
participate. Yeah, she's been amazing. Okay, so go ahead, whoever, there we go. Okay, her audio's not on.
Oh yeah, you have to share audio.
I think you have to unshare and then share again.
Monica and Dawn and John for
We can hear it
the opportunity
now.
involved in the book again. So they were kind enough to offer me the opportunity in volume one. And here we are again talking more about one of the subjects that's very close to my heart. So I have a twin PhD in adult child survivors of severe level parental alienation. That was my first PhD, and my second PhD that belongs in the same set is on the mental health practitioners who treat the adolescent and adult child survivors and what treatments they use and how we utilize them in family court is very, very important to me. So I just wanted to go through three of the questions that I was asked. So if you just bear with me and I'll start that. So let's have a look. Question one. What is the one message you hope readers take from your chapter? So if I could ask readers to carry only one message, it would be this. Family bonds are not broken by disagreement. They're broken by misdiagnosis. In high conflict family court matters, children are often viewed through the lens of having a choice, preference, or alignment. But when a child shows splitting, borrowed, or rehearsed language, erasure of a positive history within the family, or a lack of ambivalence towards a safe, loving, and emotionally available parent, that's not a preference. It's an attachment disruption. An attachment disruption is a form of child psychological abuse. And often we call it related to parental alienation. That's the layperson's term that we use. So let me keep going. So the great danger in these cases is not a lack of evidence. So it's a misunderstanding of the evidence. So when professionals draw conclusions from narratives instead of observable behaviour, the court can inadvertently reinforce the trauma it is meant to actually prevent. So a rejecting child is not autonomous. They have no autonomy. They're being conditioned. It's a big red flag. Once we read behaviour through an attachment lens, then the presentation transforms completely. So when we understand the behaviour, the child stops looking really difficult and they start looking traumatised. And a traumatised child does not need any interpretation. They need protection, they need assessment, and they need a diagnosis. So I hope that answers question one. Question two. Why is strengthening co-parenting and family bonds so important right now? So, because children, they do not form identity in isolation. They build it within family relationships. So a child receives belonging, emotional regulation, and attachment blueprints from their parents, their grandparents, their cousins, their aunts, their uncles, their friendship group. So when our parents are raised through alienation or court outcomes, the child simply does not lose contact. They lose a sense of orientation, security, and half of their psychological structure. And then if I take it one step further, children who are experiencing this who've also been abducted, and let me clarify what abducted means in the world that I work in. Abducted means if you have a court order and you choose to take a child somewhere else when they're not allowed to be going somewhere else because of the order, and you take them either too far away for the other parent to be visiting them or having any involvement in their school, or you take them interstate or you take them internationally without the other targeted parent knowing about it, nor the court, that is what we call child abduction. So we're very clear on this. Parental alienation often goes hand in hand with child abduction, and people who think that moving a child just overnight to a different place and cutting them off from that half of the family and breaking all those family bonds, that's a serious issue. And when the adolescent and adult child becomes older, then we're now treating them not only for child psychological abuse, but child psychological abuse and abduction. That is a very different presentation. So let me continue. So my chapter highlights the attachment rupture in childhood. It becomes attachment distortion in adulthood. We see now adults who fear intimacy, they can abandon relationships, they're looking for safety, they could replicate alienation with their own children. This is not out of malice, but because no one intervened in the court system in the first place looking for assessment and diagnosis, and it went just straight through. So strengthening family bonds is not idealism. It's preventative mental health intervention. A well-informed court preserves a child's relational architecture. A misinformed one collapses it. That is why attachment must guide decision-making. Prevention is shorter, safer, and more humane than reconstruction, after the damage is set in, like concrete and sometimes even like cancer. So, question 3, what gives you hope for families who are struggling today? Well, hope exists because we're developing the treatment protocols that work with the adolescent and adult child survivors. So we would never treat cancer with insulin or use chemotherapy for diabetes. In medicine, correct diagnosis determines treatment. But in family law, treatment decisions, contact orders, relocation, restrictions, they're all often made without assessment or diagnosis. So when trauma is mistaken for preference, the child is no longer protected. The child is abandoned by the systems that are designed to actually protect them. So this is where untrained professionals cause the greatest harm, and this is what I see pretty much every single week, if not daily. This is a big problem. We need, well, they just don't fail. They do not just fail to intervene, they may become instruments of abuse themselves. So if we see a child who's scared of a safe, loving, and emotionally available parent, we need to very quickly assess for child abuse. And I'm talking about the child abuse as in physical, sexual, psychological, and we also need to test assess for neglect. And then we also need to assess for spousal abuse, because if a child is being weaponized into spousal abuse, that's another form of abuse. So once we see a child scared of a parent, this is what needs to be assessed for, because there's no such thing as a mother or father phobia. It's not in the DSM-5. It is an induced pathology. This is the red flag, people. This is the red flag. Once we see it, it needs to go out of the court system into the mental health system. It's in the wrong system. We need an assessment. We need a diagnosis. So the untrained professionals that are currently working in the court system, they are misdiagnosing trauma and seeing it as a preference for the child. They are aligning unknowingly with an abusive parent. Now, the parents also need an assessment and diagnosis, because if we don't know what we're dealing with them, we don't know how that's affecting the child. You see where this is going. So it also, untrained professionals, by doing this, they're also pathologizing the protective parent. So the normal range, emotionally available parent, they're getting accused of things like false allegations of domestic violence and child sexual abuse. Excuse me. So if we see an allegation like this, we need to assess for it. We don't just take it on face value because of somebody's narrative. So this also, they will be restricting or erasing the safe parent from the child's life. This is a long-term problem. This will affect that child for the rest of their lives. Children have the right to see both of their parents as long as the parents are safe, loving, and emotionally available. So we need to legitimize. They also will be legitimizing, coercive control. So, and ultimately institutionalize abuse through the court. So the injury does not stay in the childhood. It moves into adulthood. It moves through into parenting. It becomes another intergenerational trauma, or it's piggybacking off an intergenerational trauma that's already existing. And yet, in some ways, that's exactly where the hope lives. So we now have a language for this. We now have visibility. We now have emerging frameworks, so including attachment-based models articulated by Dr. Craig Childress, for example, who reveals that alienation, it's structured, patterned, treatable pathology that's often misread as conflict. And from within my twin PhD, I'm 200,000 words into developing a treatment for adult child survivors of this particular abuse. Personally, I'd rather not be writing it. I'd rather stamp it out right now. And if we see a child scared of a parent in the court system, we need to assess and diagnose immediately so that they're just not slipping through the cracks. And we need a lot more professional development within the family court system and among the mental health practitioners who work with the children and the adolescents who was caught up in the high conflict divorce situation. So my closing statement is, if we assess and diagnose accurately, we intervene accurately. If we intervene early, we preserve family bonds. And when we preserve family bonds, we prevent trauma from becoming inherited. That's why this chapter exists. Not to describe the damage, but to stop the next generation from living in an ongoing intergenerational trauma pattern that's also being driven by the family court system. Now, today I've only spoken about children and adolescents in family court, but this is also going on out in the general community. So if you have friends or family members who are going through some sort of a separation, divorce, high conflict divorce, and you see a child scared of their safe, loving, and emotional parent, and they've had that parent in their lives and they are very bonded to that parent, that is a very, very serious concern. And we're looking directly at child psychological abuse. So please call it out. Please have a read of my chapter if you're a mental health clinician, and let's just keep going forward and try and get this stamped out and more understood as well, so that doctors like myself are not having to write treatment protocols for lifelong injury. Thanks for watching. Okay. See you later, everyone.
That was awesome. It was very informative. Definitely resonates with me. It's nice to be able to have somebody who's teaching the professionals how to identify this, and
Yeah.
that's been my experience as well. As the courts, it's not their job to create solutions. It's their job to rule on solutions that are presented to them. Um,
Yeah.
and presented
and
by and presented to them, Danica, by properly trained clinicians and doctors that have the years of experience as Dr. Alyse has, in the field, where they can, give a non-biased evaluation on the facts.
Yeah, and the other thing too, like I said in my chapter, where you cannot lead with in somewhere you've never been. So without having this knowledge, they can't help people heal because they haven't had this exposure or this form of education or resource, the tools themselves. So I'm glad she put her information into books where anybody, mental health experts can access her PhD work, and then she's working on her protocol as well.
that's awesome. I wish we'd been able to have her live. Um, and it looked like her image was frozen in there, but at least we were able to get be able to hear her, and because what she offered was very valuable. And she's one of several doctors that we have in that book, in book number 2, um, that provide their expertise,
All right,
which
I lost my headset just died, didn't even give me any warning. So I missed like the last 30 seconds.
is okay.
Okay.
I was just talking about how we have several doctors that have written chapters in the book. And so it's nice to have the expertise of these doctors who are about making a difference, because nobody paid them to be in the book. And they did not pay to be in the book. They you know, they
Yeah,
were invited and chose to participate.
absolutely. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to put it on pause. So